To discuss this further, joining me live on the broadcast from Washington, D.C. is Dr. John Blackland, Director of the ANU North America Liaison Office and Professor of International Security and Intelligence Studies at STSC. Mr. Blackland, thank you so much for joining me here on the broadcast. Sir, very quickly, let me just go over the developments which came in a few hours ago that the IAEA statement had earlier suggested that there was no change in radiation after U.S. strikes. And recently, just hours ago, there were reports suggesting a marginal setback for Iran's nuclear enrichment at best. How does this reflect on the US, which is claiming that they've completely destroyed Iran's nuclear facilities in those three locations? And will this have any kind of a bearing on this ceasefire, which is already very, very fragile?
So, yeah, great question and good to be with you. It's interesting because the bomb damage assessments take quite some time to work out. But the IAEA report would suggest that if there's no leakage from the sites detected that were bombed the other day, then perhaps the material has been relocated. But the 60% processed uranium is not enough in and of itself to which it can be used to make a bomb. You've actually got to have the facilities, and they were the ones that were targeted by the bombing. So those facilities are pretty well knocked out of action. You may think that it's hard to prove that they were destroyed, but there's no question that the delicate instrumentation required for the manufacturing of nuclear weapons is not going to be operable anytime soon, and those facilities are, more than a couple of months away from being restored in terms of being put back into operation. So I think the program's probably set back considerably further. It depends on who you listen to. Some people try and paint the picture that the United States failed and therefore paint a picture of this being a much shorter term proposition, and others who, including President Trump, who like to declare that it's been a total and utter success, and they talk about things at the other end of the spectrum. I suspect it's probably somewhere in between, but there's no question that the Iranian nuclear weapons manufacturing capability has been gravely compromised, and that's probably going to be the case for a long time. Now, whether or not they can recover from that is another matter. Of course, with political resolve, with enough money thrown at it, and with the right support, technical support from the right scientists, and perhaps with support from others like China and perhaps Russia, they could actually get back on their feet relatively quickly. The question then is, what does Russia and China want to do to help? How much is it in their interests to do that? And of course, for China, Iran has been a very important supplier of oil, and Iran has been a very important supplier of drones to Russia. Now, the question is now how much of that they can continue, given that the Israelis evidently have destroyed a considerable portion of that drone manufacturing capability. An open question, a lot yet to unpack, and there's still enormous uncertainty exactly about what this means.
Dr. Blackland, you've covered a vast area in that initial response. Let me just focus on the uranium enrichment, which essentially brought this entire 12-day ordeal to the fore. At this point, yes, there has been a setback. How far it's going to set Iran back, one doesn't know, but will Iran continue to enrich its uranium once it is past this? Do you feel Iran will go right back to where it was?
So it's very interesting, the language that we just heard the president use about use of peaceful nuclear technology. So if that is to be taken at face value, it would suggest that perhaps they're going to retreat from that much more forthright position. I mean, let's face it, they must be taking stock of how poorly things have panned out for them. All the money and time and effort and lives that they've invested into Hezbollah, into Hamas, into Bashar al-Assad's Syria, into the Houthis, and where has it got them? In addition to the money they've spent on the nuclear program, where has it got them? It's got them tears, it's got them destruction, it's got them humiliation. This is hugely humiliating for Iran. Who's flying bombers over whose country? Yes, Iran can fly missiles back at Israel, but they can't fly their air force. It's been completely decapitated. Their leadership's been decapitated. This is a moment of deep reflection for Iran. They must be thinking, okay, how do we get out of this hole? How do we save a bit of face? How do we save the regime? Let's face it. I mean, Iran is a country that is undergoing considerable internal pressures. Of course, there's the rally to the flag phenomenon that comes with a war when you've got an external foe, and much like with the bombing of Pearl Harbor in 1941, it rallied troops to the flag around in the United States. The Japanese did not anticipate quite how strongly America would react. So we don't know yet quite how strongly Iran will react. But of course, we do know that the regime has been on very thin ice in terms of its own legitimacy and popularity. So perhaps what the president's remarks there would suggest that they are going to kind of look to lower their expectations and try and hunker down to save the regime and not worry so much about trying to get back at Israel. Let's face it, because if the regime collapses, all of their plans go to naught anyway.
Understood. Dr. Blackland, when the hostilities end, that's when the narrative war pretty much begins. And that's what we're seeing as of now. All three sides are claiming that they were victorious in achieving whatever they had set out to achieve. Give me a few seconds before, let me just try to quickly summarize and then I'll come to you for a reaction. Iran has been a signatory to the NPT since decades. It has allowed IAEA to inspect its facilities in the past and even went ahead with diplomatic talks for weeks before the preemptive strikes from Israel. Even now, their president has said that they are ready to resolve issues at the negotiating table. Reports are suggesting questionable damage, if not minimal, to Iran's nuke facilities and a major loss of civilian lives, which Iran has definitely suffered, which it has claimed itself. How do you feel Iran, Israel and US come out looking at the end of these 12 days?
So Iran is diminished, no question, but I think the United States, while it may crow about the success of the attacks and the humiliation, and of course the fact that they've managed to get a ceasefire out of Israel and Iran, there are real concerns though about the legitimacy internally in the United States, with Congress pushing back on the president's powers, and also internationally. In the past, President George W. Bush, at least when he invaded in 2003, invaded Iraq, I should say, he sought UN legitimacy. The United States this time around has not even tried. So this is actually a little bit unsettling in terms of the so-called rules-based international order. People love to decry this order, and they like to pull it apart and say, what order? It doesn't exist. Well, it kind of still does, but it's a bit like the Holy Roman Empire of the medieval period. Not holy, not Roman, and not an empire, and yet somehow it's still really valuable and not to be dismissed. So, we still need the order, even though there are exceptions to the rule being taken left, right and centre. We want the United States to still be involved in this order. We want China to still be involved. We want Russia to come back to it. Otherwise, we all suffer. And so this is, I think, one of the big lessons out of this.
When we talk about lessons, Dr. Blackland, let me also get in the Israeli perspective here. The visuals of those missiles, ballistic missiles included, which came in from Iran, falling into Israel, outfoxing or overwhelming, I would say correctly, the famed Iron Dome and the famed air defenses that Israel has. Do you feel going forward, Israel and the US will perhaps not be as trigger-friendly to go into Iran preemptively?
So that's a good question. I suspect what this really is going to say is that they need to rethink their tactics and technology.
Understood.
Iron Dome is going to have to get beefed up. Essentially, they spoofed the system. Essentially, the way the Iranians operated with their drones, they saturated the system, evidently, and they then followed through with ballistic missiles that the Iron Dome system was not able to completely eradicate. And that's where the Israeli casualties were experienced and suffered. And that is, I think, the key point that countries around the world, I was at a discussion only earlier today about the implications in terms of guided weapons, about precision technology, and the fact that even the Iron Dome wasn't good enough. So, this is an iterative campaign. Technology is unfolding minute by minute in the war in Ukraine and this one between Iran and Israel. It's demonstrating that to stay abreast of technological edges, you do actually need to be quite nimble, and you can't rest on your laurels. You can't assume that the defensive systems you've got are actually up for the next challenge. And that's, I think, where Israel's going to be investing considerable additional resources in the coming weeks and months.
And Dr. Blackland, very quickly before we move further from this, I want to get one more quick reaction from you. The choice of words that we heard from the US president when he was talking about those violations of the ceasefire, and one understands, everyone, any security analyst will understand that the initial hours of any ceasefire are the most volatile. Anyone wants to get that last strike in. But for the US president to be using those choice of words for, when talking about Israel and Iran, what does that reflect about Trump's mindset when it comes to the ongoing conflict?
Look, this is the way Trump operates. He has been using evocative language about almost all of his allies and adversaries. You think about the way he's spoken about Canada, Greenland, Panama, NATO, the Europeans. He's talked. He uses evocative, emotionally laden language, and it is. You could argue it's a clever ploy. It might work domestically for him in terms of U.S. politics. My concern is it's having a very corrosive effect on goodwill towards the United States by like-minded countries that have long stood alongside the United States, but are now perhaps having to think twice about how closely they want to be associated with his kind of behaviour and his terminology and his language.
It also does reflect a slight bit of frustration there when it comes to Israel. Iran, everyone understands what US thinks about it, but then when it comes to Israel, those choice of words did reflect a little more than required. But of course, we leave it for that. That's the way Trump operates, as you correctly mentioned it. We've heard it in the past as well. That was Dr. John Blackland joining me here on the broadcast. Thank you so much, and pleasure speaking with you.